Hey there folks, Happy New Year. It's 2024 and I'm really looking forward to another exciting year for Spilt Milt Productions. My channel grew by about 15%, which it has consistently done for the past several years. And this wouldn't be possible without the financial support of my patrons and YouTube community members that really go above and beyond to make this channel and the quality of content that I produce possible. I just wouldn't be able to do it without them. And so periodically, I like to interact with my patrons and community members in more private ways and also give them a little bit stronger connection to the channel. I do that through the various platforms, and I also do it through fish-alongs periodically throughout the Pacific Northwest, where we meet up and we all get to fish together, and we usually go out and have either lunch or dinner together. It's really great. And I also wanted to do a chance to have a little Q&A session where they have the opportunity to ask questions that are a little bit complex, too complex for me to reply to in written form, so I best reply to them in video form. And so I'm going to do that today. We're going to go through a bunch of questions. A lot of these are going to focus around kokanee and salmon fishing because that's the bulk of the content that I produce. So let's go ahead and dig right in and answer some of these really good questions. Okay, let's go ahead and jump right into this first question from Brandon, who is a community member on my YouTube community page. He goes, this one might be difficult, and he has a two-part question, but what progression of gear switching or technique switching do you do when things aren't going well? So when I get out there and I'm seeing fish down at 50 feet, and I got my gear and I'm going right through them and I'm not catching, what do I do to change? And there's a couple things I'm going to do that I always start with, especially when I'm targeting fish at depth that I'm marking and I'm confident that I'm going through schools of kokanee. One is I am going to always pull one rod up above, and if am I seeing the fish like come up to my gear, especially if I have a downrigger? Are they coming up to the downrigger ball, or are they holding tight? If they're holding tight, they're not willing to move away from some depth gradient, then I'm going to start making changes to the action. And there's two ways you can do that. One, you can change your dodger style or your lure, right? So let's say I'm dragging hoochies through them. I'm going to try spinners, or I'm going to try little spoons, or something that really imparts a very different action. I find a lot of times, you can get hung up on color, and there's some days where having that color matters most, but to me it always seems to be more like action, and I experience this especially a lot during cold water, during the early part of the season and during winter kokanee fishing, where I'm marking big schools of kokanee, I'm going right through them and I can't get them to hit a hoochie, but all of a sudden I put a spinner down there and it's lights out. It's like every pass I'll get hit. Another thing that I'll do, and this has happened to me a lot, like in the spring, especially when we get all that cold snow melt water, is I'm going to shorten up the distance between my downrigger ball and my dodger. And I just find that shorter length, when you make the turns, you get a steeper drop, and a lot of times that will trigger the strike. And the last thing that I've been doing a lot this year, which has been paying dividends, is I'm always packing a jigging rod. And so if I'm trolling through schools of kokanee and I'm not getting bit, sometimes just switching up to a different tactic like jigging can really make or break the day. And I've had days on that, like out in Chelan, where they just were not that interested in hitting stuff on the troll, especially these fish that were feeding in like 30, 40 feet on the lower part of the reservoir this past spring. But as soon as I started jigging and pounding that jig on the bottom, it was fish after fish. And then gradually, as the day went on, the jigging bite turned off and went back to trolling and started picking them up. So having that versatility to be able to switch up is a big deal. The second part of his question, he's asking, what do I do to prep for a trip about a lake that I don't know? And I covered a lot of this in my how to locate kokanee. And really that's going to depend on what kind of lake it is. Is it a river-based reservoir lake that's dammed up and they're letting water out in the spring? Then I expect those fish to be lower in the lake, lower in the system, closer to the dam during drawdown. And then they'll move back up lake as towards spawning areas as the season progresses. Or is it a more natural lake with less current? Then I'm going to probably be looking for areas to troll where there are natural bathymetric features like points and humps underwater and shelves that they'll tend to congregate on. But that's a really good video to check out. It's a lengthy one, but it has a ton of info on just the basics of how to locate kokanee. I'll put that one at the end of this video. All right, let's go on to our next question. This one comes from Douglas. When using a downrigger on the troll at 50 to 65 feet deep, I noticed the dodger has a tendency to ride up a bit. Should I increase the clip distance to the dodger? Is this also the case when using dropper-based weights? He uses Paulina Peak. Yeah, so this is an interesting thing. And when I talked about dodger drop in relation to how much line you have out, I said it was linear from like 30 feet out to 100. There's pretty consistent drop further you go out. That means the relationship is pretty predictable. But at shorter distances, it was less predictable. I got some dodgers that were kind of lifting up a bit more than I expected. And the numbers, there's a lot of variability in it. And I've seen this too when I do like short setbacks, when I'm maybe only trolling 50, 60 feet behind the kayak with just like a ½ ounce or something. Sometimes those really big dodgers, depending on the brand, will go up to the surface and then they catch that surface tension and then they skate. That just seems to happen with that shorter setback. So yes, if you increase a longer setback either from the downrigger or from your snap weight, it should give that dodger a little more independence. So this is a key thing I want you to take away from this question here, is that the distance between your dodger and the weight, whether that's a cannonball or a snap weight, the greater that distance, the more independence that that dodger has to move, especially when it goes beyond 30 feet. When you get more than 30 feet away from either your downrigger ball or snap weight, that dodger is going to act more predictably. When it's tighter the weight, it's going to be more determined by how that weight itself is acting. With a downrigger, it's going to hold it really tight to a fairly small depth gradient, right? It's going to keep it right in the zone that you're targeting. Likewise, with snap weights, you get a little bit different. If it's really tight to the snap weight, that snap weight's going to go up and down through the water column and hunt a little bit more, which maybe that's a good thing if kokanee are scattered. But the further back it is, the more independence it has. It's going to not drop as quick as a lead weight just because of its surface area. So it's going to probably not run at the same depth as the lead weight is, depending on your speed and what type of line you have, etc. So just remember that. If you want less variability, run it tighter to the weight with a downrigger. If you want more variability in depth with your snap weight, run it tighter to the snap weight, because that snap weight's going to drop up and down and take that dodger and lure setup with it. So this ties in really nicely. This comes from Jack. When the arc of a fish starts below the path and ends right on the downrigger weight line, does that mean that the fish came up to the downrigger weight? Do I need to make my setback closer, right? So this is something that happens to me all the time, is I will see fish coming up to my downrigger ball, but because I have a sufficiently long setback, I can't see my gear. So I know fish are coming up to inspect the downrigger weight, but maybe I'm not getting bit on my gear. And like I said, you can pull it in tighter, but hypothetically, those fish should be coming up and checking out your gear just as much as they are checking out just a round ball going through their environment. Fish are curious by nature, and they do want to check these things out, and a lot of downrigger balls have reflective tape on them. So yes, you can try bringing it in. I do think there is a synergistic additive effect of the downrigger weight, especially if it has some sort of flash on it. And that can sometimes make a difference. But a lot of times I think it's just really the presentation itself is not triggering the strike. Like I said, it might be that they're only wanting spinners or spoons that day, or maybe they want something with less action, like a small hoochie, or even your leader length might, make a difference. In some instances, I've found that the really short leader lengths that I run of 6 to 8 inches is off-putting to them, and that's the day that I always have a few of those 12, 14-inch leaders tied up. I'll slap one of those on there just for a few minutes, and if it goes through fish and starts getting bit, well then maybe I need to switch up to that. But yes, you can run your gear tight to your downrigger ball if you feel like there is attracting a lot of fish but you're not getting bit, and see if that helps. But like I said, a lot of times I think that it's just better to switch out through different gear and see what you can get that gets that strike to happen. All right, so for the next questions, we're going to start shifting a little bit more towards some of the salmon questions. And Corey asks, how do predictions of fish counts and weather patterns, such as El Nino, play into my fishing plans for the year, if at all? And they play into it in a pretty big way. For Kokanee example, I know that during El Nino years, we're likely to have less ice, less snowpack, and that's going to result in a lot of our lakes turning on earlier than they traditionally would. So when I'm looking at lakes in Southern Oregon, like Crane Prairie or Wikia, or maybe even Northern California, you know, in a La Nina year, some of those lakes may not start fishing very well until April or May. It may not even be possible to fish them because of ice and snowpack. Whereas in traditional El Nino years, I know that those lakes are typically going to come online as early as March or even before then, and definitely by April, a lot of them will be iced out and fishable. So it really does dictate the timing in which I do it. I also look at salmon forecasts all the time. So for example, this year, I know that spring Chinook runs on the Columbia River are looking really poor. It's going to be a tough season. So maybe I won't prioritize trips down to the lower Columbia for those fish, but I see sockeye numbers are predicted to be really strong, almost 500,000 fish coming up Columbia River, which means I can prioritize those fisheries. It's easy because I happen to live on the end of that sockeye run, but it does give me priority in terms of planning and where I want to be all the time. So I'm always relying on that. I'm also making quick snap judgments all the time based on real-time dam counts. For example, a few years ago, I was doing my Kokanee Across America, and I had just finished up a day at Anderson Ranch, and I had planned on fishing Lucky Peak for Kokanee, but I saw there was a massive spike of spring Chinook on Bonneville Dam, like 8,000 fish, and it just looked like to me the numbers were building really high. So I drove down quickly the next day and fished on the lower Columbia and managed to pull out 2 really nice spring Chinook. So yeah, I'm always responding to that data all the time. This one's from Jeremy Weeks, and this one relates to sockeye salmon. He says, what do I think of the Max 5.8 Double D Dodgers? And how does trolling work when you're maneuvering near other boats like at Brewster? Are you still 100 feet out? So I do rely on the Max Double Ds here for my sockeye fisheries. It's a larger Dodger. It throws around those bigger hoochies a little bit better. But there's also a lot of other people running that same Dodger setup here. So I also like to mix in some of the Lure Jensen herring Dodgers and some of the more traditional shapes that have a little bit different action. And I put my own custom tape colors on them. The thing about the Brewster combat fishery is there's hundreds of boats out there. Everybody's running 2 6 rods depending on how many's in the boat, and a lot of them are, those fish are seeing that same gear over and over again. So I really like to make my gear set itself apart. Now I'm definitely not running at 100 foot back. That you would be in Tangle City there all the time. Traditionally, the furthest I'm running back in that sockeye fishery is usually 35, 40 feet at most. You don't even really have to go that far. You want to be really tight to the boat. Most of the time I'm about 30 feet, just using a couple ounces, and that's all it takes to catch these sockeye, because they tend to surface orient, except for during really hot water years, and they'll spend a little bit more time deeper. But for the most part, you don't really need a lot of line out. So always run the appropriate amount of weight so that you don't have to run a long setback. So if you need to get deeper, put more weight on, not run more line out. That's going to help avoid a lot of headaches, and that way you won't have to have a lot of tangles. All right, the next question is from Mike. I know nothing about targeting sockeye in the salt, but I'd like to learn. This is really interesting. There's not a lot of sockeye fisheries in the salt, or at least not a lot of people doing it. The only example I can think of is the Port Alberni fishery in Canada on Vancouver Island. And that is a terminal fishery, so those fish are swimming up a fjord and staging there before they make the run up the rivers to spawn. And there they do exactly the same thing we do. They are trolling generally, mid-sized Dodgers with either bare red hooks or red hooks with a piece of shrimp on them. And they enjoy really good success there. I think a lot of people aren't trying that here, although there are huge quantities of sockeye pouring through parts of the Puget Sound. And there are areas that it's open to fish for them in the salt. It's not something I've ever done, but to me it would seem possible if you could find the right areas where these fish are moving through and staging up, especially these Baker River fish. And then plus there's all the other fish headed up the Fraser, although the Fraser River fish numbers have been down for many years, so I'm not sure how much fruit that would bear, but definitely would be interesting to try dialing it in. Down here, there's not a lot of people doing it. And last question I'm going to cover today is from Alex. It says, what are your kayak fishing or outdoor equipment you can't live without? This is a good question. I would say hands down the most important piece of equipment for me, no matter if I'm on the ice or in my kayak or in a powerboat, is some sort of sonar. It just gives you so much information, especially one with GPS. It's going to give you, locations where the fish are. It gives you that benthic structure, water temperature, and it also can give you your troll speeds. And trolling is one of the #1 ways in which I target a lot of fish. So I would say that sonar is absolutely the most important thing to me. Second to that is going to be my PFD. Not a lot of people wear them, but I always try to keep mine on. I just love having that peace of mind that if something will happen, the unanticipated, I know I'll be able to float and hopefully get out of that situation. Just a huge number of people lose their lives on the water every year, and it's all because they don't have a PFD on. Anyways, this was really fun. I hope to do this a few more times throughout the year. I've got a ton of really cool things planned this year on the Kokanee front. I got another trip to the Caribou, maybe 2. And then I'm going to explore some Kokanee waters that I've kind of neglected, and that is northern Idaho and Montana. I have 1 or more trips planned there. I unfortunately, the conservation work I've been doing for the better part of 20 years, I've been contracted to do a lot of the statistical analysis for that for more than 10 years. And we were able to downlist the species I've been working on from endangered to threatened, but immediately because of that, the budgets got much smaller. So they've decided to take away some of that work for me. So I'm trying to figure out what my next steps are in order to find employment, and one that doesn't conflict with video production that much on the channel. It's going to be tough to find that balance, but with every lost opportunity, there's new opportunities arise. So I'm still hopeful that I can sort something out that allows me to be a proficient content creator producing really quality educational fishing content. But yeah, we got that trip planned, and then I've got one more trip to Europe to hit some more target bucket list species in the Arctic. And of course, I'll be doing tons of stuff around the Pacific Northwest, as I always do. All right, folks, it was a great 2023, and I'm really looking forward to 2024. And I hope I get to see some of you out on the water. And if I do, just remember, fish smarter, not harder.